Hello everyone, TMMgamer here, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you another one of my football talk videos where I spend the time talking about real life football and things that are in the media at the moment, just my opinions on certain topics. And today's topic is going to be the England national team and what can we do to improve the standard of the England national team. And obviously this is a very, very hot topic in the press at the moment with Greg Dyke, the new FA chairman or commissioner or whatever his official title is. But the new head of the FA, Greg Dyke, has organised this special commission with people like Danny Mills and Rio Ferdinand in to try and sit down and figure out why the England national team isn't performing to the standards we all want and what can we do to try and improve that. So here's a couple of thoughts that I have on it. But before I dive into that, there's just two things I wanted to quickly mention to you, and those are my last two videos. I did a review of Grand Theft Auto 5 yesterday, and the video before that was another football talk video talking about the action this Sunday, so all the Premier League action, you know, focusing on a little bit of Aston Villa and then spending the rest of the time on the time weird derby and Manchester City versus Chelsea. So if any of those two videos are interesting for you, you can either check them out on my channel page, or as always my previous video is linked in the description so you can check that out there. But like I've been saying, let's talk about England national team. Now, as most of you guys know, there's been quite a big discussion about the English national team for a number of years now, but especially in the last, say, 2 or 3 months with, as I mentioned, Greg Dyke becoming the new head of the FA. There's been a big talk about how we can improve English football because there's some pretty bad statistics about English football at the moment. We haven't won a trophy since 1966 and we've only made 2 semi-finals since then, and one of those semi-finals was in a tournament that was hosted in this country. We've had supposedly the golden generation, inverted commas, over the last 10 years with the likes of Scholes, the Nevilles, the Ferdinands, Terry, all of these world-class players, and we've failed to do anything with them. And now we've got to the stage where I think people begin to realise that the England national team isn't as good as we once were, and there's a big talk about what we can do to do that. And one of the main things that people have said is a big reason for the English national team being so poor is the lack of English players playing in the Premier League. And at first glance, this is obviously true. If you look at it on face value, you can say that this is true because I think the stat is around in the low 30% mark is the level of English players playing in the Premier League, and of course that counts people on the bench, people who only get 1 or 2 games, and it also counts Dwight Gale, who if he gets into the England team, I have a chance of getting into the England team. So immediately discount half of those players from realistic England selection. That leaves you only 15% of the players in the Premier League with a realistic chance of coming to represent England at international level, and that is a very, very, very low number. I mean, when you compare it to all the other major leagues in Europe, most notably the Spanish League and the Bundesliga, the percentage of homegrown players is much, much higher. So on face value, that is a very, very obvious thing to talk about. However, the Premier League has been pretty much since its inception based on incredible foreign imports. I mean, you look at some of the absolutely legendary players who've come from overseas to play in the Premier League. You look at players like the Cantonars, the Henrys, the Vieiras, and then in the modern era, at the moment we've got like Robin van Persie, Sergio Aguero. These are real top quality players, and the Premier League is undoubtedly better for having them. I mean, if you ask any fan up and down the country whether having Sergio Aguero in the Premier League is a good thing, they'll all answer yes, because it's just the standard is so good and the viewing is so good. It's one of the reasons why the Premier League is, in my opinion, the best league in the world, because every single team in this league can take points off every other. The standard of player is amazing. But this comes at a cost of the English national team, because the money generated from the Premier League because of its amazing success gives the Premier League clubs spending power that isn't really matched anywhere in Europe, apart from teams which are owned by just literally insanely rich people. You have to basically have your own air force to compete with some of the clubs in the Premier League. I mean, Manchester City are owned by a royal family. A royal family of a country owns a football club in the Premier League, and this spending power is just absolutely crazy. But what this means, having all this massive wealth in the league, whilst it is a good thing because it enables the the teams to attract the best players, and it enables them to spend a lot on facilities and what have you. It does cause a little bit of a problem because the value and the worth of a Premier League place is so immense. There is absolutely huge pressure to keep a team in that league. I mean, I think under the new TV deal, the team that finishes 20th this season will earn more in TV money than Manchester City did when they won the league a couple of years ago. That is just how much money is in the Premier League at the moment. And if you drop into the Championship, the distance between them in wealth, it's simply astronomical. I mean, you can see this now with Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have come up, they've spent a bit of money, but they're still miles away, absolutely miles away from where you have to be to compete. Look at teams like Cardiff, look at teams like Southampton. Southampton have come up and they have spent huge money because they needed to compete, and it's gone very well for Southampton, but that just shows you how much you have to spend to compete. And this leads on to another problem which definitely impacts the national team. There is so much pressure to stay in this league because of the vast wealth and because of the quality, and let's be honest, everyone wants to be in the Premier League if you're in England. No one's happy sitting in the Championship. All of this pressure means there's such a reliance on instant results and instant success, and this is exactly the problem with trying to get youths through. Because let's just put you in a position of a newly promoted manager. You've just come into the Premier League. What are you going to do? Your squad isn't good enough at the moment. What are you going to do? You're going to risk playing the young kids, the youths coming through the academy system who haven't got any experience, or are you going to go out and buy players with the money that you're getting from the TV to try and strengthen your squad? Obviously you're going to go out and strengthen your squad by buying players. And the problem comes with this is that English players by definition are just massively overpriced. When you look at the English players who get bought and sold and comparably talented foreign players, the foreign players are much cheaper. So the incentive is always there for a Premier League club to go out into the Belgian league, into the Spanish league, and pick up a player because they can get him much cheaper than an equivalent English talent. And this begins to have a problem because you can see now, teams come up through the divisions and they're in the Premier League. There's so much money in it. The chairman aren't willing to let the team go down, obviously, because it's a massive financial hit. So that immediately takes away a lot of emphasis from developing your own players because you need that instant success. Because you've got so much money, you can now go out around the world and buy pretty much whoever you want. You can go and buy someone for £4 million, £5 million. If you're an Arsenal, you can go out and spend 40 million on Mesut Ozil. If you're Manchester United, you can go and buy any player you want. Perhaps Manchester United wasn't the best example. If you're Manchester City, you can go out and buy any player you want. If you're Manchester United, you can try for 3 months and then settle for Marouane Fellaini, but it's a separate commentary. You begin to see the problem here. Teams go out, they don't want to risk it all on youths because they don't want to go down and have that financial problems and turn into a Portsmouth, so they buy players to keep them in the league. And this stops English players from getting a chance, because if you're a manager, if your job's on the line, if you've got fans baying for your blood, what are you going to do? You're going to play that 16-year-old kid who has a lot of promise, or are you going to go out and you're going to buy that 25-year-old from France or from Spain or Germany and put him in because he's going to have an instant impact? And this massive pressure and wealth really does suppress young talent coming through. The only time young talent can come through is at a very successful top 4 club, for example, Manchester United, Arsenal. They bring the youths through because they have 8 or 9 world-class players or exceptionally talented Premier League players, so that they can pick alongside them. So they can play 1 or 2 youths in the team. They can play a young Danny Welbeck a few years back, or a Jack Wilshere if you're at Arsenal, because alongside him you've got Wayne Rooney, you've got Robin van Persie, you've got Nemanja Vidic at the back, and Rio Ferdinand, all of these quality players. Or on the flip side of it, you've got to be so out of money in comparison that you just have to go for the youths. So a good example of this is Aston Villa. Randy Lerner spent a lot of money under Martin O'Neill trying to get Villa into the top 4. He spent big on wages and big on transfer fees, and eventually it got to the point where it became unsustainable and we had to dramatically reduce our wage bill. And because of this, we had to go out into League 1 and 2 and buy Ashley Westwood from Crewe for 500k, and buy Matt Loughton and get him in, and buy a Joe Bennett, and play players like a Nathan Baker perhaps a bit too early. because we didn't have the option to go out and spend 45 million in the transfer window to beef our squad up. We just didn't have the funds anymore. So it gets to the stage where the only teams that can realistically bring youth through are the ones that have no choice, or the absolutely massive clubs who have such a huge budget that they can afford to have 14 world-class players and still pick a couple of kids to bring in the League Cup or bring in, in a couple of home Premier League games. For the vast majority of the league, they don't have that luxury. So it brings back, how can we improve this situation? How can we get younger English players a chance in the Premier League? Because a lot of people have said, we need to put quotas on foreign players, we need to do this, we need to do that. Personally, I don't think that will work. On the one hand, I absolutely love foreigners being here for a start. The Premier League is much, much better for players like Sergio Aguero, and Thierry Henry and Eric Cantona. Some of my, best football moments are watching Thierry Henry play. I would not want to see that removed from the Premier League. It's just such a pivotal part. It's one of the things that makes this league so special and unique, is having all of these world-class foreign players in it. And also, because we're a member of the EU, we cannot put quotas on EU citizens working in this country. You can't do it. It's just simply not possible. So it takes you away from the simple, flat-out ban to perhaps a more of an incentive system. And this is the idea that I've been spending time thinking about this, and I actually went to the barbers and had a haircut today and spent time talking to him about this and what he would do in the situation, just getting some more ideas. And the thing that I would do in this situation, like where we are now, is not put a quota on foreign players. It's just unenforceable, it won't happen, and there'll always be loopholes around it, like the homegrown players rule right now. You had players like Cesc Fabregas at Arsenal when he was still there, counting as a homegrown player because he'd been bought through the youth system at Arsenal, bought from a very, very young age from Barcelona, trained at Arsenal for a few years, he counts as a homegrown player even though he's Spanish. So if you put a homegrown players rule in, it can just be easily circumvented. And it actually is even worse for English players, because instead of having an academy full of young talent locally or nationally, what you go and do is you go and buy a talented Spaniard as early as you possibly can to make sure he can qualify for the homegrown rule. So instead of just having the first team full of many nationalities, you now have the academy teams full of that to get around this homegrown rule. So I think that's been a little bit counterproductive in some ways. So what I would do is instead do an incentive system. What I would do is subsidise academies, because the FA makes so much money. It makes an astronomical amount of money. It's supposed to be an organisation not to make profit. It's supposed to be there to look after English football, to develop football nationally from grassroots to international level. It's not there to line the pockets of the people who work for it. So all of this money we generate from TV, from selling out Wembley, from having all of these FA Cup games held at Wembley, all of this money, or at least a large part of it, could be spent on subsidising academies. So immediately that would encourage a lot more teams to invest in youth facilities, because youth facilities are expensive. Spending 5 or 6 years worth of coaching on a youngster who might not even make it, that's a big investment in time, money and effort. And a lot of teams can't afford that. If you've just got promoted into the Premier League, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and spend your money on buying new players, or are you going to go out and spend it on a youth facility that might not do anything for you until 10 years' time? And this is the sort of thing we need to do. So firstly, I'd subsidise academies. Secondly, I would do a reward system for players capped at international level for England. And what I would do is, if you have a player who you've bought through your youth system who is capped for England at any level, the club is given money. And I don't know the exact figure of this because I don't have the data sheets for all 20 Premier League clubs and what their budget is and what a reasonable sum of money would be to them, instead of just being a drop in the ocean with all this TV money. But a reasonable piece of cash every time one of your players turns out for England. Obviously it would start lowest at under 19 level or whatever, a little bit more under 21s, and if you get a full international appearance, you get a lot more money. Now what I would do is to stop teams from simply buying English talent once they've become internationally renowned, is if you, for example, go out and buy a 24-year-old English player who's already in the national team, you get a substantially lower figure of money for having him play in the national team. So what this is encouraging people to do is it gives them financial reward for building a youth academy and getting these players through, because if they have a successful one, not only do they have a good player on their hands, but they get paid for producing a player for the national team. So already this provides an incentive not to just go out and spend 10-15 million on a talented foreign player who would be good now, but to try and develop young English players to try and, you know, improve your team in the future and get that international money. One thing I would do as well is be a little bit more strict on the squad restrictions, because like I say, you can't put quotas on how many foreign players can play in the Premier League. It just can't be done under the, you know, law. But what you can do is say, right, that you have to have a certain number of English homegrown players, or British, let's just say British homegrown players, because there's plenty of, you know, population movement within the British Isles. If you have 3 or 4 British youths under the age of 20, you've got to have another 3 under the age of 23, and they've got to be in your Premier League squad. Immediately, that would make teams pick and try and nurture these players through. And I think what this would stop as well is having these teams go out and buy these Barcelona youngsters aged 16 just so they can get them in early and qualify through the homegrown rules. If you're going to keep the homegrown rules, make sure that it's not just you've trained in this country for 3 years. Make sure it's you've been in this country, let's say 6 years. Because then if someone, for example, moved across to this country when they're 12 and they spent all the time until they're 18 here playing for Arsenal or playing for Villa or playing for anyone, then you definitely deserve to be qualified as a homegrown player. Having Cesc Fabregas come over when he spent most of his life at Barcelona, he's had a couple of years at Arsenal, and now he counts as a homegrown player before he went back. Yeah, I think that's missing the point of what the homegrown player system was trying to achieve. Its aims were definitely in the right area, because obviously it was trying to encourage teams to pick and raise more English and British youths through, instead of just going for the foreign route that I've described. But it didn't work in practice. So by having a much more tightly controlled, you must have this number of, you know, British English players that you've developed, as well as having the incentive system for, if you do get one of them to play for England, we will give you money. That would act as more of an incentive, in my opinion, because I don't want the Premier League to be completely gutted. I love the league as it is. It's a great spectacle to watch. The teams are so competitive and evenly matched. When you look at a league like Spain, when you've got 4 or 5 teams who are decent, and then you've got the rest of the league who is pretty much average. You know, if you finish 12th in the Liga, I would put strong money on a team who finishes 12th in the Liga to get relegated from the Premier League. You know, the Premier League is so intense, it's fast-paced, it's competitive, and the quality foreign players that get bought in definitely improve the league. There's no doubt about that, and I would never ever want to see that change. But there has to be a balance. You know, we can't just have this situation where teams are forced into buying players because the alternative is just not feasible. We need to encourage teams from a very early age to nurture and raise young talent, because for every team that does it, for every West Ham, for every Aston Villa, for every Liverpool, there are team after team after team who can't afford to do it. You know, the academies just aren't there. So that would be my broad overview of what to do. I don't think you can go too much further than this at simple, you know, Premier League level. Obviously what you can do is spend so much more money at grassroots, because the number of qualified coaches we have in this country is pathetic compared to how many are in Spain and Germany. We need more coaches, we need more spending at grassroots, we need, you know, a greater focus on technical ability. Instead of having, you know, 10-year-olds playing a full-size pitch and just hoof it up front to the guy who's developed early and run past everyone, force people to play 7-a-side until they're, you know, 15, so they've got a touch. You know, do like they do in the Netherlands, where every player has to play in every position so they get an appreciation of it and they learn all the different technical skills. Have it so youth players, the goalkeepers, aren't allowed to kick the ball out. They have to underarm roll it to a player to encourage passing and technique. Now, all of these things can be done to improve. But I think it definitely needs the incentive at the highest level for teams to play English players, because you can spend as much money as you like at the grassroots level, but if the incentive to play English players isn't there, teams won't do it. If teams can go out and buy a foreign player for half the price of an equivalently talented English player, they will do that. So by having this multiple strategy, having the rewards for playing English players, having the spending at the grassroots level, and just encouraging every level from the grassroots right to the top to focus on technique and passing and just nurturing talent, that is when we'll have a national team that can be successful. You know, the Premier League is a brilliant league, but it definitely impinges on some of the young English players coming through because they just don't get given a chance because the stakes are so high and you can get a great foreign player for cheaper. Yeah, obviously managers are going to do that, so it's going to need all of these different levels to be put into gear for progress to be made. So guys, that's the end of the commentary. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to it. There's plenty I've talked about there. I'd be definitely interested in hearing what you guys have to say about it. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether you have any thoughts in general, I'd be very, very interested in seeing what those are. So guys, once again, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and as always,